Hi, it's Olaide, one of the psychology academic mentors. This tutorial is the first of a few that covers how to write quantitative reports. It will cover how to write an abstract and an introduction, the first two parts of a report. Before we start, it might be worth looking at what the purpose of a report is. The main purpose is to communicate what research has been carried out in a clear, systematic, and standardized way. Reports should include 5 main things. Number 1, the background of what's being researched. So what past research has already taken place. Number 2, why is this research being done and how does it contribute to science? Number 3, how will you carry out your research? So what is the methodology? This needs to be in enough detail so that it can be replicated. 4, what were the results? And lastly, number 5, what do your results mean in terms of your hypothesis? Okay, so the general format is what you can see on the screen. We'll go into detail on this so that it becomes really clear to you. But really briefly, there is a title, an abstract, an introduction, a method section which is made up of participants, materials, design, procedure and scoring. It then goes on to results and lastly a discussion. Right at the end of the report, you will also have a reference list and an appendix. You don't need to include subheadings for the title, abstract or introduction. However, you should include subheadings for the method and all of its subsections, the results, the discussion, the references, and the appendix. Right, so the first thing we're going to look at in this tutorial is the abstract. Abstracts. So, they are summaries of the entire report. They are no longer than 150 words. They include the most important details which lets potential readers know exactly what the study is about. Ideally, they are written right at the end so that all the important parts can be included. It should cover the motivations for carrying out the research, who the participants were, including their age range, the mean age, and the standard deviation, the methodology used, the main findings, and a quick conclusion. There is an example on the screen. It is completely fictional. It is from Field 2018. And it reads, Ugly, 1993, has shown that the propensity to misclassify members of the opposite sex as attractive is increased in nightclub settings. This study was designed to ascertain whether this effect is due to dim lighting employed in these venues or the consumption of alcohol in these settings. Ratings of the attractiveness of a set of stooge participants were taken in both a well-lit and a dimly lit nightclub by both sober and drunk participants. A two-way ANOVA revealed a significant effect of alcohol consumption, but not of the lighting used. The results suggest that contrary to Ugly's hypothesis, dim lighting does not contribute to the inflated attractiveness of opposite gender mates. Instead, these ratings are influenced solely by alcohol intake. Do you spot any missing information? Maybe pause the video and have a think. Okay, so this abstract did not include any information on who the participants were. Simply adding in the age range, the mean, and standard deviation would improve this completely. Otherwise, as you can see, all the main points were summarized in a couple of sentences. This provides enough information for a potential reader to decide whether they should read this report or not. And that's literally it for the abstract. Remember, don't attempt to write this until you have completed the rest of your report. The second thing we're going to look at is the introduction. So, the introduction. You don't need a title, so there should be no heading for this. Just go straight into it. It can have subheadings, however. This can be useful in organizing the material to make it easier for the reader, particularly if you have a longer introduction, for example, within a dissertation. Okay, So a good introduction does two things. Firstly, it tells the reader what has already been done in the topic by other researchers. And secondly, it tells the reader what the point of the current study is. The introduction flows a bit like an essay. It needs to have well-structured paragraphs and a good flow of ideas. It should flow from previous research findings to your own hypothesis. So based on everything that you already know from previous research, what is it that you expect to find? The idea is that our research fills the gap of inconsistent and ambiguous research findings. Your research should aim to clarify these problems or fill these gaps. That being said, your aims and hypotheses should be clearly stated at the end of your introduction. When writing an introduction, you are moving from the general to more specific. So starting off really broad, so things like key definitions, to things that are really specific to your own study. I recommend using PEEL paragraphs. So P, make your point. E, evidence your point. So back it up with research evidence and examples. E, explain how that evidence supports your point. And then L, link your point to the following paragraph or back to your main point. As you move through the introduction, it should become more and more specific to the research that you are going to carry out. So here is an example of how an introduction should be structured. This example is based on the beer goggle effect. So you would start off by defining the beer goggle effect and why it is important. Then you would describe the relevant previous research and what conclusions can be drawn about the beer goggle effect. You will then need to describe problems within previous research or explain any unresolved issues within the literature. Then, explain how you are going to overcome these problems and why it is important that you do so. Based on everything that you have said and past research findings, you then need to state your hypothesis. What is it that you expect to find? When you are stating your hypothesis, there are a few things to keep in mind. First, you need to identify your independent and dependent variables, but you need to do this subtly. A good example is on the screen, and it reads, this study looked at whether the amount of alcohol drunk and the gender of the customer has an effect on the attractiveness of the mate selected. This is followed by a bad example, which reads, the independent variable was the amount of alcohol drunk and the dependent variable was the attractiveness of the mate selected. Do you see the difference? One's quite subtle and one is very obvious. We're looking for more subtle. Do not expect the reader to guess what you are thinking. It's really important to state your hypothesis in a very clear manner. So for example, alcohol is expected to reduce the attractiveness of the selected mate. But be sure that you explain why you expect these results. Remember, your introduction should lead to this point, so it should be really clear to the reader. And that's it for the abstract and the introduction. The next video will look at the method section. But that's it for now. So as per usual, your academic mentors are here to support you. So if you need any further support with report writing, please do give us a shout. Hope to hear from you soon. Bye.